Hi. So, firstly, I need to say a big thank you to, a little thank you to UNSW for, I guess, housing the last 5 years of my life, and thank you to Sandra for helping send this out to the broader student body, and also big thank you to everyone for coming. It's pretty awkward if I'm here by myself, so I appreciate the company. We're probably going to run a little bit past 7. I don't really know how far. We'll won't drag you here too long, but probably like 7:10, 7:15. And this talks about leadership, right? It's one of the waffliest words out there. It's a bit like synergy, moving forward, all of these great buzz terms that you read, and top 10 skills in leadership and stuff like this. But we really want to get to the crux of what it is exactly and what it means in practice, because it is a word that's thrown around, in my opinion, a little too brashly. And I've met a lot of people who are leaders over the last 5 years who are really just not, basically. And I've learned a lot of what I have through pretty harsh experiences sometimes, but I guess that's what we're here to talk about. So first, just a quick run through of what we are talking about. I'm going to tell you a story at the start because I like stories, and I want to give a bit of context on me. This is important. I'll explain why. Then we're going to talk about what leadership is exactly, like actually define it, because it is one of those waffly terms again. Then we're going to talk about why you should give a damn. Sure, lots of things. We can define lots of things, but it doesn't make it important to you. But it is important to every single person in this room. And then we're going to talk exactly about how you become a better leader if you aren't already, and we're all in a place where we can improve from. So how we become a better leader essentially consists of these 6 things, which we will go into more detail about. It's about fostering relationships, and ideally profound relationships. Relationships are the basis of this. Communicating a vision and identifying with a mission. That rhyme wasn't intended. And putting the right things first. Okay, you only have so much time in the day. Learning when to stand up. Yep. Preparing for the challenges. Because there are difficult parts of all of this, right? There are really difficult parts of all of this. And being operationally effective, which is really just my way of saying you need to actually be a good manager, which is a very small part of what leadership is. Then we'll recap and we'll have some questions. But to start off, what we're going to start off with is a story. So this is a photo of, funnily enough, me 3 years ago. 3 years and 20 odd days exactly. There's one person, Jason, there. He's actually sitting right here, one of the few people still around with me. This was the first time I ever spoke in front of a group of people that I was responsible for. It was in M18, and it was the first time I'd ever really spoken on behalf of anyone. And as many of you know, I've been involved in a solo car race in 2015, and at this point we were 577 days away from that race. Very long time away. I had no idea what I was doing. I had a lanyard because I thought I was a cool kid at the time. Someone gave me a lanyard and I thought I was in 3rd year, so I could wear a lanyard now. That lasted like a month. People stopped talking to me. So, and this was kind of the beginning. I didn't really know a lot of these people, and I didn't know a lot about leadership. I didn't really understand how to get people moving or how to get them on a path. But we did a fair few things in that time, which I will again come back to. But the most important one is that we got this car ready to race across the country at the end of 2015. A lot of special people here. This is us about a week before we left. This is a team of 25 people that came from about a year and a half of recruiting, where we had about 400 people wanting to be part of this team, and only 25 really saw it through. Right? It was a process by which we had to figure out who were the people that counted, who were the people that saw what we did as counting, I guess. And we had fun. We hopped on the road. This is footage of us on the race. It's a 6-day race from Darwin to Adelaide. It's just kind of beautiful seeing the desert, seeing a car that students had built, seeing cars that my friends, my co-workers had built, driving through the desert. And, to think that's just a fraction of its speed is also quite terrifying. But that's what we did. We had to drive the car across the country for 6 straight days without breaking down. And it was terrifying, and we really needed to rely on each other quite a bit. This is some, I guess, photos of what we did. Some beautiful landscapes, and you can kind of get a sense of, we had about 5 or 6 cars on the road, 25 people. We're near no towns where we have to carry our own water, our own food. It's very strenuous, and it puts a lot of pressure on people. But what's most interesting is that at the end of the third day, we actually ran into some problems. So on this race for us, we were running really low on power. The car we had, parts of it were inherited from 2013, and we just wasn't designed for this race. From the moment we left Darwin heading down to Adelaide, we were constantly being chased by this imaginary line, which was kind of like the disqualification line. If you fall behind this point, then you're going to lose. And we kind of knew this for a few days, but on the third day, we're heading into Alice Springs, pretty much the dead center of the country, and we're about 50 kilometers out, but we only have about 30 kilometers more worth of power. Energy, I guess, to keep the electrical engineers happy. And we had to pull over. And at this time, a lot of things were running through my head. You know, I'd taken 25 people here, I'd taken a month out of their life, said, let's get behind this cause. I believe in this, you should believe in this, let's go to the desert. And here I was about to have to tell some of them that, sorry, but we got to put this car in the trailer and we didn't compete. It's like a non-compete, right? Like you're disqualified, basically. And, you know, that was stressful. That was scary. We were lucky enough that some of the brighter people in our team, as opposed to the dumb people in our team, managed to actually figure out a way where we could basically bypass some of the worst parts of the battery pack and give us just enough juice to get into Alice Springs. But what was even scarier was we had 14 minutes to get into Alice Springs before like a time disqualification came in, but we had about 15 minutes worth of driving. If we drove any faster, the car would have probably exploded. And I don't mean that like symbolically, I mean that literally. If we ran, you know, if we got a red light, we would have been disqualified. If we went slow at any point, we would have been disqualified. And everything was kind of coming back to this one moment. And I remember this moment because it's probably the most stressed I've ever been. And everyone came together. You know, everyone, we had 25 people across 5 cars. We had people who were at the kind of, you know, finish line, the midway line, waiting for us. You know, they were talking to the officials, trying to, you know, smother them with love and tell them about all the horrible things that are happening on the road. We had cars in front of us that were clearing traffic, you know, calling out what was happening, telling us the light cycles on the road to actually like adjust our speeds if we could. We had cars behind ready to help out whenever we could, and we had people constantly monitoring things like the battery temperature and the battery voltages. And the driver of the solar car, he was telling me he had his hand on the door handle for the last 10 kilometers, waiting for the car to kind of go up in flames and just to jump out. UNSW engineering. So it was all okay, but the thing that really got me was that we were ready and we had this really rich sense of trust, like, and communication. And we wouldn't have made it without that. Like, we wouldn't have even fixed the problem without that. But, you know, we were going into a place where people could have died, and we were going into a place where every minute mattered, and where communication and trust was the most important thing. And it's at these points, and I've had a few of them, that I've seen all of the effort you put into leadership and bringing people together come through. Because that's what it comes back to, right? Like everything. We spend 95% of the time preparing ourselves. Exams are like that, you know, you spend all semester getting ready for it, and then you just punch through. And sometimes you have those moments where you feel like it did all come together. In the case of exams, it's not really like that, but in the case of things like this, there were beautiful moments. And these are the things that inspire me, and it's the reason I got involved with teams like this at the start. So, that was a very long-winded story. This is us pulling back on the road at one point, and this is us 3 days later crossing the finish line. About 80 hours later, at a point when I thought I'd have to explain to the team that we lost, and I'm sorry. We were crossing the finish line, and we came third. We were third over the finish line. 11 teams tried to make it to Adelaide, and 6 didn't make it. 5 did, and we came third. So, huge achievement for the team. This is one of my favorite quotes. People in the team have heard it a lot. This is a Stanley McChrystal quote. He's a brigadier general, I think, in the US. It says, if you're a leader, the people who count on you help you up, and if you're a leader, the people who count on you need you on your feet. Right? This is something that I felt true only in those really intense moments, because you rely on these people as much as they rely on you, and there's a beautiful symbiotic relationship that happens here. And only when you do actually hold yourself to a high standard of leadership. So, getting on to the more fun parts. The reason I need to talk about me for about 3 minutes is because I'm not perfect and I have a very narrow context here. I haven't worked in industry for more than 12 months. I have not been a leader in a paid environment. I've never had employees that I've had to pay. I'm a 23-year-old student here at UNSW, and I've been working predominantly with students. Okay, so all the stuff that we're running through tonight is important, and I think it's real, and I think it's worth people understanding. But just like when you open a textbook or a BuzzFeed link, it has context, so treat it like that. So discard what you think is irrelevant. These things don't just transfer across context easily. I was a weird kid. This is really important. This is me trying to fit in year 6. I didn't quite figure it out. I didn't have a lot of friends throughout high school, throughout primary school, as well as a lot of high school, and I just didn't quite socially interact the best way I could. I definitely learned later that was largely because a big part of me was very introverted, but I think I realized that far too late. The reason I'm telling you this, is because, you know, I had to learn a lot of the things I learned about people. My idea of a good Friday night is sitting in bed in my underpants eating ice cream, not going out to the club, right? And typically those kinds of people aren't good at rallying people together. You know, they're like, yeah, let's all go to, I don't want to say my bedroom, but you get the point, right? You know, it's harder. Like, you know, I met people that are naturally charismatic and they thrive off the energy of other people, and they just like go and go and go, and they're like, come on guys, let's go team, you know? And I'm not like that, and that's important because a lot of people think I am. A lot of people think I'm naturally charismatic or that I have some like outgoing aura about me, and the truth is every day I have to try hard to have that, right? I've had to fight all the time to have that. This video, I found this morning and I love it because this sums up kind of how I used to socialize, basically. This dog I can resonate with. This dog. It tries hard, but it has no idea what it's doing. Me on the left is me presenting about 2 years ago. These are the times when people think I have some idea of what I'm doing. And me on the right is meeting a member of parliament and just not being in the mood that day to deal with humans. It's one of my favorite photos. Because I can see in my eyes how much I didn't want to leave the house that day. And I often don't want to leave the house, but that doesn't matter because, that's not the video. That doesn't matter because what I'm trying to do is beyond that, right? I don't care who I am. I've always like thought of the idea that you try and be who you want to be. You don't like let who you are, I guess, naturally define you. Like reach beyond that as much as you can. Last bit of context with me, this is just the nuts and bolts of it. I'm a graduate here of computer science and engineering. My WAM is definitionally nearly standard. I've worked at a bunch of... What's your WAM, bro? 68.
Growing.
So I've had some industry experience. I've done 3 full internships in the software industry. I've done a bunch of contracting, subcontracting work in the software industry. I've been a tutor at UNSW and taught nearly 900 students now. I'm the CTO of a startup. It's a very small startup, so that's just really a fancy way of saying that I do all the coding. And I've been involved with SunSwift for 3.5 years, and I've been looking after the RoboCup RunSwift team for about a year now. This is the extent of my experience, right? Nothing more. So please take that into account. Getting past the boring stuff. What exactly is leadership? Now, I know, again, it's Tuesday today, and it's 6:30 p.m. nearly, but would someone like to offer a helping hand in helping me define this? Like, because it's a weird term, right? Like, it's like one of those, like, how do you define, like, cohesion or something, right? Like, what, any ideas? Someone help me out, otherwise I'll have to ask Simba. Okay, Simba.
That's rough. Providing direction.
Providing direction? Yeah, okay. Providing direction, sure. So like kind of the compass of a group of people. That's really important. Direction's a big thing. For me, it came down to 5 big things. Now, what's interesting is that when you ask most people, people who haven't been thinking about leadership for 30 minutes prior, like what it is, they'll often tell you things that are kind of the antithesis of that, right? I got this nice little table here where we're going to compare 2 terms. And I think, like, on the right-hand side is what people often think about when they think of leadership, whereas it's actually often the stuff on the left-hand side. Firstly, management. Management, I do not give a damn about. Anyone who says they're a good manager, like, you can train a monkey to manage things, right? A computer can manage things. Like, managing is a very robotic task of keeping track of things and pushing buttons, right? Managing is not really to do with, we're playing semantics here, okay, so appreciate that. It's not really to do with human relationships or human psychology, right? It's a very robotic thing. And management doesn't get things done, it just keeps things rolling, right? So in my opinion, relationships are the most important part about leadership. Okay, having relationships with people, with groups, like building those connections, especially like in the context I've been working in of volunteer groups where you can't just like throw cash at them and be like, love me, you have to express yourself to them like that. So relationships are the most important thing. Secondly, I hear a lot of people talk about their presentation abilities. I hate this so deeply. I hear people, they're like, I have great presenting experience, right? Which then means like, I stand up straight, I speak from the diaphragm, and I look you in the eye when I speak, right? But no one ever convinced anyone to do anything by staring them dead in the eye. If anything, possibly the opposite, right? What leadership is about is it's about communicating. It's about taking an idea and explaining it in a way that makes sense to other people or is relatable to other people. You know, I've had times in my life where I've had to, I've had to convince people to skip out on church on Sunday to come and work on a solar car, which really just consists of getting their hands dirty and it breaking again anyway. And you can't just ask them to do that. You have to communicate with them in a way that makes sense to them. Exposition doesn't really work in terms of just like talking like I am now. Exposition, I know some of you might not be familiar, it's kind of just throwing stuff out there, right? Like an article might just be an exposition. Whereas engaging is really what we're interested in. We're interested in like a sense of feedback. We're interested in like right now when I'm talking to you, I'm like, who looks bored? Who's texting? Who's on their phone, right? Like, and I will adjust myself accordingly, right? Not just in a presentation capacity, but just in like a one-on-one capacity. If people feel like some people don't like jokes, right? And some people do. Some people thrive on humor. Some people thrive on dark humor, and some people thrive on love and fluffy feelings, you know, and you need to engage with those people in their own special ways. This is another important one, discipline. Discipline doesn't matter. Like this whole thought of like a leader being like a US Army something or other, that is just like yelling at people or telling them what to do, right? Like sometimes people think of leadership and they think, oh, that's the person that stands up the front and they're like, sit down, or like, we need to go now. That's not leadership. That's being a pain in the ass, right? No one likes that. Understanding is the biggest thing. You can get anyone to do anything if you understand them and you can appeal to their sense. Like a lot of these words, they all mesh together, right? But if you can understand where someone's coming from, right? Why is someone walking slowly when you need them to run? Maybe they have a sore leg. Maybe they don't understand why they need to run. Maybe you're just telling them to run because they didn't hear something earlier. If you just stop for a moment and you say, look, we need to run because we don't want you to slow us down because we need to leave. And if we're late, then everyone's going to lose and everyone's going to be sad. Then they'll go, oh, okay, I'll run. Like people really just want to be engaged with like that. They don't want to be yelled at. They don't want to be disciplined. And another misnomer is that a lot of people think leadership is about doing everything, right? Like being at the front and just like getting your hands in all the pies and getting so neck deep in everything. But it's really not, because you only have so much time, and that means that you can only do so much, and therefore you need to do the right things. Okay, so these things are all what the next session comes down to. That is the wrong keyboard. So this is another thing I wrote down a long time ago, which I dug up the other day. So in my opinion, leadership's really what's left when you take your stereotypical images of management and you intersect them with the human condition, right? So we have these ideas about management, like we'll all sit down at 9 a.m. and we'll have a stand-up and we'll talk about the things we do, and then at 5 we'll regroup and everything will be done. And then we'll fire the people that didn't get the stuff done, right? Like that's not really how it works. Like people are complicated. More quotes. I love quotes. I'm so sorry, but I love these to bits. This is a good comparison. It's probably my favorite one on the topic. Management is the efficiency in climbing the ladder of success. Leadership determines whether the ladder is leaning against the right wall. Okay, so I'm not saying that management is not something we care about, but the point is it really is an operational thing. It drives you if you have the right compass, if you have the right direction with things. So, this is most of the boilerplate stuff. Why should you want to be a leader? I'm going to ask this question again and see if anyone gives a damn. But like you're here tonight. Some of you are here, no doubt, out of respect. Some of you are here out of pity. I understand that. But I'm sure some of you are here because you're curious about something, or you want to maybe learn a little bit more, but like why? Like what's in it for you? Like why not go back to just coding 12 hours software engineering, like coding 12 hours a day and sitting in your room making some money? Callum?
When a group of people come together and they want to make something that's bigger than any of the individuals can make on their own, you need someone to help facilitate, help organize, and steer them in the right direction.
Yeah, definitely. So, things done with people in groups are always better than things done alone, right? It's that, whatever the quote is, the whole's bigger than the sum of the parts, stuff like that. Absolutely. I want to tackle this from a numbers perspective, and then I want to tackle it from a, I guess, more self-interested reason. The first reason I think being a leader, particularly in engineering, is important is because it's becoming more and more relevant every year, right? No matter what you're doing. Like, I have so many statistics here for you. This is the number of New South Innovations associated startups. 100, 194, 246, 448. These have not gone through a validation process that NSI is starting up next year. So like this is a bit of a waffly number, but it gives you like a sense of the relative figures. So the number of startups at UNSW are increasing. Like, this is more than one startup starting up a day, right? And startups are fueled by leadership more than nearly any other thing. We have over 19 student groups at UNSW and 12 student societies directly associated with the faculty. This doesn't even include people or subgroups doing their own little thing. And we take in over 8,800 new undergraduates every year just into engineering. Okay, that's a huge number of people. And when we have this many people, obviously it means that you're going to have more opportunities to work with other people. You're going to be more incentivized to work in groups. You're going to have more people competing in the job market. And this leads me to my next point, is if we look at the Engineers Australia data, we are just getting more engineers graduating. We're getting more engineers commencing, it's funny, the commencement line is a bit higher than the completion line. But, you know, these numbers are going up every single year. And this is one of the most interesting graphs to me because, you know, our engineering supply in terms of students is going up significantly. But this green line here is the number of jobs for engineers. The red line is the number of engineering jobs. Okay, does that distinction make sense? So, like, I have a few friends that recently went and got employed in administration or management consultancy or something like this. They aren't engineering jobs, right? But they are jobs for engineers. And most people come and do engineering because they like engineering. So what this means is that we're competing more and more every year for engineering-specific jobs. More of us are going into banking, into finance, into all these other batshit boring things every single year. And we don't really want that, right? Like, we all want the best jobs. We all want the jobs that, like, fulfill us and, you know, the cool Google X jobs or something like this where we get to go and work on some super fancy piece of tech which no one else knows about. And these people want good leaders. More importantly, like, we just are having more students. There's this old quote from a professor a few years ago where they talked about how the problem with places like UNSW is that we graduate thousands of students every year, and all that happens is that they all just have transcripts with slightly different numbers. You know, no one is really any different from each other. Maybe they have a different colored skin or they speak a little louder or softer, but we're all essentially graduating into this big pool that kind of get pinballed into random jobs throughout the industry through these like grad programs, which I'm sure we've all had experience applying for. So, you know, we want to stand out. That's what we all want for ourselves, right? We want to be different. We want someone to chase us. Like, the dream is not to apply for a job, but to have someone ask you to come work with them. You know, and at the end of the day, sure, if you're a little smarter, then you might get paid a little more, or they might want you to go work in the basement somewhere for a while. But people do want good leaders, and people do want people who know how to work with other people. I always tell a story. I guess I can't name names since this is being recorded, but when I was actually it doesn't work there anymore. When I was employed at Dolby, my kind of supervisor, he got a little bit tipsy on our last day when we all went out to the pub to say bye to the interns, and he said to me, he's like, Hayden, I have to tell you a secret. And I was like, oh god. And he was like, you failed your technical interview for the internship. And I was like, okay, great, thank you for that. And then he's like, we just employed you because you seemed like a fun guy. And I was like, well, fooled you. But more importantly, it made me realize, like, these people weren't really necessarily looking for marks. Like, And I kept asking more and more people in industry later, and then I realized that a lot of people in industry interview you, and all that's going through their head is, do I want to sit next to this person all day? You know, like most people that hire you, unless you're in a huge conglomerate, they want to like actually work with you. So that's kind of the main thing there. Teamwork. We often hear about teamwork. We all dread it. Who's had a crappy group assignment before? Who's worked in groups and decided that they never want to touch another human being again? So I was thinking about this a few weeks ago. One of the problems with university is that university is an academic landscape. And when you're assessed academically, you can only do that when you're assessed individually, right? Like you can't just have a course that like is like, we're all going to do group work together. And there's a few of them at uni and they're all awful because no one knows how to actually assess you. So everything ends up coming back to single assessment. Comes back to exams, stuff like that. But the problem is that's not really how the real world works at all. University is probably the least teamwork-driven time you'll experience in the rest of your life, I would say. Everything after here, you're going to have to work with other people. You know, I always think back to like first year, Comp 1917, for those of you who've done it, is they sit you down and they say, here's a little bit of code, an empty file, and they say, go code it up and then submit it. And you're like, done, I'm now a little more of an engineer. Right, but nothing in industry works like that, right? We're working in teams, we're working in big parts of projects, there's lots of interfacing. We need to know how to work with other people. And understanding leadership and how to be led is an important part of that. Keep clicking the wrong thing. Last thing on this, before we get into nuts and bolts, is that I've said this to a lot of people in the last few years. If you think for a second about how you're envisioning yourself graduating, what you often do is you think about getting a job. And then there's like a magical black hole after that. Right? You're like, I want to get this grad job. You think about your starting salary, you think about the places you work, but you never really think like, okay, now once I'm at the company, it'd be really nice if I could make an impact, maybe get promoted, maybe show them that I have some extra skills and go do something more interesting. Right? It's very one-dimensional the way we think about it. We say, okay, I'm going to get good and then I'm going to get a job. And that's it, right? But in actual fact, you know, lots of people can get jobs. It's easy to lie. It's easy to pad your resume and put on a pretty face in the interview and pretend you're some super outgoing critical thinker. But when you actually get into the workplace, you want to have a character and ability that means you can excel, that people work with you and they say, damn, I like working with this person and I would like to keep working with them. Or like, who's someone I've seen that knows how to bring people together? Who's someone that goes into conflict zones and actually resolves these things? Okay, so a lot of this stuff isn't necessarily about improving your graduate opportunities. It's really about how can you become a better person. So this is just a line from me here. It's like your biggest investment will always be in your character and your experience, not in your intellect or your marks. That's kind of it at the end of the day, because your character is going to be with you for the rest of your life. The experiences you have and your ability to deal with complex situations go with you. Your understanding of, you know, mechanical dynamics is not really that valuable in the scheme of things. Okay? Cool. The fun part is actually how we do this thing. Okay, this is where it gets a little bit interesting. I talked a little bit before about fostering profound relationships, and there's two big parts to it: personal relationships and group relationships. I like to split these down the middle because I personally believe that it's really important that you treat individuals with a lot of respect, a lot of care, a lot of attention, regardless of anything and no matter what you need to get done. Because at the end of the day, individual relationships are what is the foundation of a broader group working. Okay. When I have people be part of any team I'm part of, I make an effort to get to know them personally, not in a weird kind of way, but you know, I ask them where they live. You know, that's the first. No, I'm curious about where they live. Like, how far do they commute? If I ask you, like, where do you live, and you say, I live. There's a guy in Sunswift at the moment. He lives in near Katoomba, right? If I know that, then I understand why they might seem a little bit edgy if they come to a lecture like this and it's going overtime. You know, if I know someone lives with their family or lives alone, I know people that live with their family tend to have a little less time than people who don't. You know, people who catch public transport find long hours at uni a little more difficult than those who drive in. So getting a sense of like how people are means you can actually, I guess, customize yourself a little bit to them, understand them and tailor your relationship with them. But like always being kind to individuals is the most important thing. This is contrasted against groups. If you want things done with groups, you need to be a little bit firmer. You need to be a little bit more to the point. And I always say, like, one thing I've had a tendency of doing over the years is that when I'm with a group of people that I'm leading, I will rip them to shreds and remind them all that all of the things they wanted to do on the weekend, they're not going to do because we need to get stuff done. Okay? And then what happens is that usually a few of them come up to me after and they're like, but I really need to do this thing. And I'm like, okay, you go do the thing. You know, that's fine. Because the point is that you need the group setting to establish precedences. You need it to establish tones and mentalities to get a vibe through, right? Like, because the group setting is really where you do set the tone. It's where everyone is like, okay, today's a serious day. Obviously, you're going to have to make exceptions, right? You're not Hitler. You're not going to tell everyone all the time to do things they can't do. You can't yell progress into people, right? But don't make the mistake of getting into a group situation and then, you know, kind of being really soft about it. Like, leave the group areas for the firm stuff and leave the personal areas for the more touchy stuff. Sorry, weird sentences. This is one of my favorite photos. This is us right after we broke the land speed record in 2014. This is our team of about 24. I love this photo because I know every single person here and I know them pretty well, right? They all think of me when they think of the team, like when they think of us standing together in the team as the guy who yells a lot or always seems grumpy or like, oh, put that away, Hayden's coming, kind of thing. But, you know, if I'm sitting down one-on-one with them, we'll just talk about whatever, you know. We get along, we understand each other, and that's really important because that bedrock's what fuels them through. Quote. Number 2, this one is probably the most important of the 6, communication. I mentioned this at the start, like communication is key. The reason communication is important is because people need to rally behind the idea you're presenting. Because at the end of the day, if you're in a startup, if you're in a group, if you're in a workspace environment, it doesn't really matter. You exist for a reason. So I always talk about, we have like a 3-tiered approach to things, and the first 2 tiers are the most important. You should always define a mission or like a vision of what you're doing. Right? And then you decide what the goals are based on that. Split those 2 things up. So for instance, in 2015, we decided that we were going to make our solar car Eve road legal on the roads, and then we wanted to race it across the country. Right? But you can't have a group that's driven around the idea of those 2 things. You can't say, okay, we're all going to come in on Saturday because we want to race a car across the country. That doesn't get people motivated. No one really cares. That doesn't get them, that's not a reason to do it when the days are hard. So we developed broader missions. You know, the mission for our team was that we wanted to be a platform to inspire people about sustainable energy. Right? We were never trying to build, mass produce a car. We were trying to make people see this car and say, man, electric cars are cool. You know, when you see a Tesla and you think, damn, I like electric cars. We were trying to do something similar to that. And we were also trying to educate engineers. So everything we became about was like, we're part of this group because we want to educate the people that are part of it. We want them to learn things. We want them to come out better than if they went to their lectures. You know, and they were the missions that drove our goals. And our goals were things like we're going to get the car on the road and stuff like that. So the first and most important part of communication, I'd say this is one of the key takeaways of the night, is that I don't believe that people just inherently disagree about stuff. I think most people are logical. I think most people are empathetical, and that when they get given the same context and the same scenario, that they'll come to the same conclusions. Okay, I think when you look at why a lot of people disagree, why they have arguments, someone thinks this needs to get done in 3 days, someone thinks it needs to get done in 7. You tell someone we need to get it done tomorrow, and they think, no, that's way too soon. It's not because you fundamentally disagree on principles, it's often because you see or understand different things. So for instance, as like a leader of SunSwift, I often had to deal with the faculty of engineering. And they had pressure on us. So I'll give you a good example. We'd have an event, some random event on campus where we'd be showing the car off. But you know, we'd have some part of the car that's not on. Maybe the door's not attached right now because we're working on it. You don't want the door attached while you're working on it, right? But, you know, I had to tell engineers that, okay, we're going to have to spend 4 hours tonight reattaching the door so it opens and closes, and then tomorrow morning we're going to have to take it off. And they're like, that's stupid. Like, we're working on it today, we're going to work on it tomorrow, why are we putting it on? It's like, no one's going to care if the door's off. They get that we're building a car, but I'm sitting here and I'm like, I know which VIPs are coming to this event. I know the things that they get interested in. You know, I'm thinking about the kind of experiences I want them to have with the car. So we're not really disagreeing because we think the door is important or not. We're disagreeing because they maybe don't have the context of why this is important, who's coming. And similarly, maybe I don't have the context as to how difficult it actually is. Maybe it's actually a really dangerous task and I don't think it is. Right? Like that's why we're disagreeing. So I think communication is most important, and if you ever come into disagreements with people, generally as a leader, your first and most important thing is to bring your context together. Ask them questions. Right? Asking questions is the most powerful and important thing you can do when you're trying to connect to another person. So this is like how our contexts are before, and it's getting closer, and now we're together. Yay, right? We're trying to bring context together, and you know, I'll ask them. Someone says, I don't want to get that done, there's not enough time. I say, okay, we need this done by Wednesday, and they say, I can't get it done by Wednesday. I say, why? They're like, oh, well, you know, the parts aren't going to arrive. I say, are there any other parts we can use? You know, and they're like, yeah, but they're too expensive. Oh, well, here's the thing. They have been telling you they can't do it in 3 days because they think they're financially constrained. Right? But me over here, I understand that this is a bigger priority than saving some money, so I know we're going to buy it. So we've had this conversation here, and we've now decided that, oh, we can actually get it done in 3 days. We just have to do something different, which costs more money, and that's okay. Right? So this communication is really important. So, you know, as a leader, if you ever find yourself disagreeing with people, or more often people disagreeing with you, then that's the first thing you should think about. What do I know that they don't, and what do they know that I don't? You notice the bubble for the leaders a little bigger? It's because they're better? No, it's because leaders naturally are higher up in organizations or groups, and therefore they have a broader context. They see more things. If we're looking down in like a tree structure of a group of people, you can see down the tree a lot easier than you can see across the tree, right? So leaders generally do have a broader context, and this makes it quite difficult because you can often be challenged a lot, you can often be argued with a lot, you can often be told you're being unfair, where often you just see a lot of things that other people don't. And it's not your job to tell them to shut up and listen because you know more than them or because you're in charge and you know these things. It's your job to bring them into your context or to broaden their context. Cool. When I was first running the team, I asked someone a few months in, I said, what do you like about me? What do you dislike about me as a leader? And I remember one of the things they said was that compared to other people they'd worked with, they felt like they weren't working for the team's leader, they were working for Hayden. That's what they told me. Right? They felt like they were actually interacting with another human being. And yeah, they're in charge, but they understood your identity carried through. This is a photo of me during our world record attempt. It's a little bit weird, but I was wearing my dressing gown because it was cold. We were down on the south coast of Australia. And I'm a bit of a weird guy. I don't have any qualms wearing my dressing gown out for photo shoots generally. And you know, I'm not trying to pretend. And I think one of the worst things you see a lot of people do is try and, you know, puff up their chest and put on a nice shirt and act a little more formal, you know, or give that really condescending tone, like, I'm really sorry you feel that way about when your work's due, but you're gonna have to push it. I'm sorry. You know, it's like one of the worst things you can do. So being yourself and being honest with people is definitely one of the more important things. There's an Elon Musk quote which says, if you need inspiring words, don't do it, right? I wouldn't necessarily say that's true across all contexts, otherwise I would probably spend a lot of my life in my bedroom, once again, eating ice cream. But what is important is that the things you're part of and the things you're trying to get people to do, you believe in the idea. If you don't believe in what you're doing, it won't work, no matter what. Like, that's just always been true. You need to rally behind the idea. You need to understand it. Like when I was dealing with the solar car stuff, I knew every day why I was doing this. I was like, this is so important to me that we give these students these opportunities. I loved watching people grow. I loved watching people get older, get more confident, get a broader sense of engineering. And, you know, I had a lot of trouble when I first started dealing with the RoboCup work at UNSW, RunSwift, because going from racing solar cars across the country and people catching on fire, we were just having little robots kicking balls around. And I was kind of just thinking in my head, I'm like, well, this is kind of stupid. in a way, right? Like it's cool, but like lots of things are cool. Like why am I doing this with my time? Like why aren't I spending my time with my friends or my family? Like why am I wasting time with these robots, right? So I spent time and I was like, I'm going to figure out how to believe in this thing that I'm doing here, you know? And you start to fall in love with, again, teamwork. Teamwork's this really inspiring thing. It's a really easy mission to get behind, is to let people grow. And in student environments, it's even more exciting because students have so much to learn. We all have so much to learn all the time. So I started to think, okay, I love this RoboCup thing because I'm getting to see people work together. I'm seeing students work on big software projects with lots of complex parts that you don't get in the classroom, you know. That was what was exciting. I was like, these people are going to leave the work that's happening in this group with skills that they just wouldn't be able to get before spending years in the industry, you know. And that's what motivates me. This is another very important thing, motivation. How, like, ask yourself right now, like, how would you motivate someone? So right now you've decided that you're going to, you know, write a piece of software that takes 100 images of someone's face and turns them into like one big image of their face using those smaller images, right? Probably a bad example. But like, how are you going to convince someone to come in for 5 days and do it? You know, or let's say they've been coming in for 5 days to do it and they're only coming in for 3, and then next week it's 2, and then they're not coming in much at all. Like, how do you actually motivate them to pick up their game and achieve the goal? And the answer really is that you've got 3 ways to do it, and the bottom one is the best and the top one's the worst. The simplest thing you can do is you can appeal to their sense of respect for you, right? Come in because we really need to get this done. That's the simplest thing to do. It's not it doesn't have a lot of longevity, this resource, because trust me, respect for an individual can degrade very quickly when you're ruining their lives, you know? Like when you're like a symbol of why they're coming in every Saturday, it just doesn't last very long. So appealing to the leader is not a very good thing. The second best thing you can do is appeal to their sense of value in the group, right? So this is one shift I made very rapidly in 2015, which got a lot of people working, was that people stopped coming to meetings on time, or they came late, or they didn't come. And what I used to do is I used to pick up the phone and I used to call every one of them. And I'd be like, where the are you, right? You need to be here now. You know, you said you'd be here, you promised you'd be here, we're part of this team, like, and that works a couple of times, but then they just get sick of you, and then you're also like just a douchebag at the end of the day. You know, you're just like feeding people bad vibes all the time. So what I started to do was I started to not start the meetings until everyone was there, right? Now this is a little bit controversial, it still largely is. But so if it's 6 o'clock, the meeting was meant to be there, and we were missing 3 people, and they decided they were going to be late or they were going to get some food. We made everyone wait until they were there. And then what happens is these people rock up to the meeting, and everyone else is like, they're pissed off at me, obviously, as well. But like, they're pissed off at them as well, because like they're sitting there being like, I came here early, like I got off the bus and I ran here because I thought I was going to be late. Like these people can't even like walk quickly. So all of a sudden, like, because people care about their peers more than the people above them, like, because they're the people they interact with, right? If we are in a complex team, then you're just like a boss in some ways, not their friends. They're not the people they socially rely on. So appealing to the group's much better. But the best thing you can do is appeal to their own senses, right? If I have someone who is producing, let's say they're designing something for the car and they're producing bad documentation. It doesn't contain the things you need. It's missing how much everything costs. All the attachments are broken. Again, you can say, you know, we need to do this. Come on, do this, please, please, please. I'm telling you we need to do this. That's number 3 there. That's okay. You can say, oh, this is really important because we're not leaving this room until everyone documents everything, right? You know, just like the meeting. That's better. That usually, generally has better outcomes. But even better is appeal to them. This is back to communication. Start talking to them. Be like, hey, like, you know, do you want to be the best engineer you can be? Like, do you want to learn these skills, or do you not care? One of my favorite techniques, someone always used to, I can't even remember where I saw this, was like, someone's having a bad day, ask them how they're feeling on a scale of 1 to 10. Like, how good is their day on a scale of 1 to 10? And they'll probably give you a number like 3 or 4. And then ask them why it's not a 1, right? And then they have to stop and they have to list you reasons why they actually think their day is kind of good. And you make them stop and reflect on these things. And similarly, you know, raise the bar. If someone's not doing what you want and you need to get them there, the best thing you can do is paint a picture of a place they want to be and then encourage and promote them up to that point. You know, maybe they think halfway is okay, you know, but yeah, just appeal to their senses. Oh God. This quote from Jack Welch is definitely one of my favorite on communication. Real communication takes countless hours of eyeball to eyeball, back and forth. It is human beings coming to see and accept things through a constant interactive process aimed at consensus. It's a bit heavy. And it must be absolutely relentless. And I think that last line is the most important. The people who get other people to do things, the leaders that stand out are the ones not who have the skills, but the ones who put the time and the effort in. Because these things about relationships and communication, the two biggest things, only are ever effective if you are just constantly pounding people. Ask people how they are every day. I always have this habit of, if I have people working under me, every day I'm just going to ask them, how are you doing? Generally to do with the work, like just engage with them, be part of their lives, make them think you care. They're like, oh, you know, nothing's really going right. And you're like, why isn't it going right? You know, like it's just this constant engagement that really, that's the wrong way, that makes a difference. So, we're getting nearer to the end. Probably about 15 odd minutes to go. There's 2 videos I want to show just to break up the monotony of me speaking. The first one, some of you may have seen. It's a 90-second video of us when we attempted to break the land speed record in 2014. I love watching this video because I like seeing everyone work together. And I've always said from the start, the reason I wanted to learn more about leadership was nothing is greater than putting yourself out there, trying to be a leader, bringing people together, and then accomplishing something together. Right? And I adore... So yeah, in the middle of 2014, we did head down to this horrible place with a lot of fog. It was very cold. And we were up at 4 or 5 every morning. Just like the race I talked about before, like these are people who, you know, whether skipping out on university or their own commitments, like coming together, working together, trusting each other. Like if you make mistakes, people will die, you know. If you aren't talking to each other, then people are going to get hurt or people are going to get let down. If you, like, because the biggest problem with a lot of these projects, and it's true for most things, is if you have 25 people in your group, for things to go right, you need 25 people to do the right thing. For things to go wrong, you need 1 person to do the wrong thing. So it's a very, very important relationship. Number 3 is putting the right things first. I mentioned this before in terms of, I see a lot of these leaders who, they think the idea of being in charge or being a leader is like getting in and getting dirty. Right? Like, let's go do all the things. I'm going to go talk with everyone and work on everything with everyone and sit beside them with everything. And, you know, I'm going to do every possible thing I can. Again, the problem is that there's a certain amount of things you need to get done, and then everything else is bonus. And if you try and do everything, you're going to miss out the important things, and you're going to do some of the auxiliary stuff that you just don't need. So there's 3 key points here I want to get across. This is the most important one of the 3. I firmly believe that if you are responsible for a startup, a student group, society, your first priority above people learning anything and people being happy is getting the job done. Okay, now that might seem a little bit backwards, a little bit evil, I guess, in some ways, but I want you to understand that it's a little more complex than this. One thing I learned in leadership, who here votes like left wing, like Greens or like Labour, right? Like everyone's like, yay, environment and future and public transport and stuff. I remember as I started leading more and more of these groups, what I started realizing was that life isn't always that simple. Don't get me wrong, I'm not Tony Abbott now, but what you see is that sometimes you can't not hurt someone. In these complex systems and in these complex societies and groups, you're always going to piss someone off. You're always going to hurt someone. And that's because people have conflicting interests. Like when you are alone or you are taking a one-on-one like interaction with someone, you can very easily twist the scenarios to make sure that everyone is happy. You can get away with that quite often. But when you have lots of different groups, you're going to piss someone off. A good example is, let's say someone is only available Monday through Wednesday and the other person's only available Thursday through Sunday. But they need to work together. Okay, great. Someone's going to get mad at you. And then leadership becomes this kind of awkward battle of you're just deciding who you're going to annoy, right? Sometimes you annoy the people who'll take it the most. Sometimes you annoy them in varying degrees at different times so that none of them actually ever explode. But it's really hard. And the reason I mentioned about getting things done, I want to take you back to the story I mentioned at the start, where we were on the road and we were heading into Alice Springs on the solo car race. Or even a similar story with the world record attempt. When things are done, when people look back at things in a year, when people reflect on how they feel, they really do only remember the result. The kind of feelings they had, they're there, but they tend to fade away, particularly if the outcome was good, right? I'm sure we all remember it. I was talking to someone about one of the course's operating systems here in computer science, and I said to them, I was like, I loved that course. That was such a great course. And then they were like talking about the assignments, and I was thinking back to it, and I just remember like, it was a very hard course, and I remember stressing out all the time. I remember getting frustrated. I remember sitting up at 3 a.m. I was working with a partner. I kept falling asleep. I never told anyone this. I used to tell him I was going to the bathroom, and then I just fall asleep on the bathroom floor, because if I went to, I was doing this with my housemate, if I tried to go to bed, he'd just come into my room and wake me up and say, we need to keep working. Right? And I was just like, it was so awful. I was just so stressed all the time with it. And I don't remember that because the mark went okay and I was happy with what I learned, right? Like the result kind of helps encompass this overall thing. When we look back at the solo car race, there were times on the race where we were getting into some arguments with people. Most people in the team don't really know this and they're never going to, but we nearly sent one of the students home. We nearly put them on a plane, told them to F off because of their attitude. There were lots of people who were mad at me all the time. There were lots of people who were mad at the rest of the leadership team all of the time. I used to have to wake people up at 7 a.m. and say, we need to go do some work. And they'd be like, I want to not, let me sleep in, I'm tired. Right? You slept more than me last night. Shut up, don't tell me how to sleep. Right? And you have to stick through that. And the problem is, like, you might think, oh, okay, I'll just leave them alone. But what happens if you leave them alone? What happens if you let people do what they want is that you don't accomplish the overall goal. And if you don't accomplish the overall goal, you annoy everyone. There was this time I remember where we were getting this car ready for a track day, where we got to drive the car around. And what happened was we had all of our mechanical engineers in. They were working all week really hard, got the car into a ready state. We had the electrical engineers, they were in there sometimes. Bless their souls, they're good people. And they were mostly working on it, but I remember a few of them were really stressed and they're like, I can't come in on Saturday, I have these assignments due, And at the time I was like, okay, sure, like, Don't come in on Saturday. That's okay. I don't want to like stress you out. And you know what happened? The car didn't work, right? It just didn't work. So now what's happened is I've decided to make 1 or 2 people a little bit warmer and happier inside, but 23 other people have given up their time in the week with their assignments just to spend a Saturday with a car that doesn't work. They effectively wasted their time, right? And I had to own that. And this is where the complexity of leadership, in my opinion, does come into play, is you need to realize that you're responsible for the group above all individuals, okay? Now, I'm not saying that you tell people to, you know, toughen up and just deal with it. Like, we still talk about all this communication and personal relationships, right? Like appeal to them, try and understand them, you know, like, why is your assignment stressful? You know, maybe there's other people in the team that can help you out. You know, like, why don't you have the time? You know, can we delegate any of this? You know, this understanding still encompasses back into this, but the point is, your first priority is to get things done. You know, another good example, I went to RoboCup last year and things went really badly. We had the worst RoboCup result in history, which was great. It's a good time. But you know, we were really chill about it. We didn't get stressed. We didn't really come into the lab and work more than a few days a week. In fact, you know, 1 or 2 of the people in the team didn't come in. Maybe they came in once every second week. No one was stressed. No one ever got worried. We didn't have any like late night. I mean, like me and another guy did, but most people didn't have any late nights. But the thing is, like, when we look back on it, no one really remembers, oh, what a peaceful time that was. They just remember, oh God, we lost. Oh God, it was painful. You know, I don't want to think about it. I can't even watch the footage. It hurts me too much. And that's it. Your first priority is to get the job done. Okay, and then everything after that is like, how can you make that getting the job done as fun as possible, and how can you teach people everything they need to know? Because like, what people take away from this is the most important thing. Some pretty simple things here. Don't involve yourself in low-level work. See a lot of people do this. I mentioned this a few times. Leaders think they need to go and get into the nuts and bolts. This just stops you doing your job, which is managing and overseeing things. I don't know if I have the photo in here. That's not the photo. Maybe it'll come up later. I make a habit of when we have people working on the car, I do not touch anything. I just do not touch anything with my hands. If people say to me, like, can you hold this spanner? I'm like, no, not touch anything. Because the second you start delving lower into these levels, you start not doing your job. You stop overseeing, you stop keeping track of how people are feeling. You stop paying attention to who's stressed out, who's tired, you know, who needs a break, stuff like that. I glossed over this, but it is generally important that you do work harder than everyone else. That can't happen all the time. If you can't work harder than everyone else for a while, just pretend, okay? The integrity of you seeming like you are working harder than everyone else is a very important thing as well. And choose good people. This is Rob. Rob's sitting in the lecture theatre here. We waste our time a lot picking bad people and trying to lead with other people or trying to lead bad people. Find good people. It's worth the time. Even if you have to look through 10, 12, 20 people to find good people, one good person working with you is going to be worth 20 bad people you have to get through in the end. The worst thing you can do is be lazy about finding good people around you. So, this third last part, when to stand up and when to bend over. The thing about leadership is obviously it's important that you have to learn. You need to learn a lot. You need to be very open to taking in new information. But you also need to stand strong when you know you've learned everything you can in that particular context. One thing I find interesting is the way a lot of people want to be inspired as a leader is they want to look to other leaders holistically. They want to like idolize like Elon Musk or something. But you don't have to make it so simple. There's lots of people that I think are not the best team members, not the best engineers, but they have these attributes which I aspire to, right? So for instance, we have a guy called Gabriel up the top here. He produces a lot of bad work. If you're listening, Gabe, you know it's true. A lot of his work just is substandard. He gets it done really quickly though, which is sometimes what we need. Generally, we just keep him off anything structural, I guess, is the simplest thing. But the thing about Gabe is that I've never seen him sad. He's always beaming with smiles and everything's positive. you know? Like, I think at one point we were at this day and something happened. He broke the car by accident. And I was like saying to him, like, Gabe, just like, why? And I was like, are you not annoyed? Are you not stressed? And he's like, well, at least if it's broken, we can't crash. You know, and obviously I'm not saying that's necessarily the best attitude, but I was always inspired by his positivity. Before, trying to bring context together, trying to build these personal relationships with people. In terms of these groups, let's say you really want to get rid of someone. Say you've been through this process multiple times and they're just like nothing but like a hindrance, because this does happen time and time again. It is a sad reality that sometimes there are people you just want to F off after like months and months and months of just causing havoc and undermining people. Best thing you can do is stop giving them work. It's actually really simple. We're in volunteer organizations here. The only reason people go into volunteer organizations is to do the work, right? No one goes like to St. Vinny's and just goes and sits on a chair outside the front of the store and is like, oh, I'm volunteering, right? Like, people only go to these places to do work. So stop giving them work. Kind of stop putting expectations on them. You'll find very quickly they'll just disappear. The reason they're a pain in the ass is because you're giving them work and they're not doing it, and you haven't realized that they don't want to do it yet. What happens when good people want to leave? So often, you know, I showed a photo of Rob before. It was one of the good people we had in our groups, and I asked, you know, well, what happens if Rob says, okay, I don't really want to do this anymore, but you really, really need them. You really, really need these people. Again, this is a pretty straightforward answer. You just need to let them go. Again, with volunteer organizations, these are bleeding heart things. These are people are here because they believe in the idea or because their life circumstances match up to it. And if that changes, you're not going to keep them around. You're not paying them. You're often just making their life a little bit harder, even for a bigger reward. So you just have to really let them go. Don't hold on to these things. I think I've seen a few people see like bad people that, you know, it's like bad relationships. They're like, oh no, they're just going through a bad spell. They'll be back soon. And, you know, 6 months later, they still don't care, and you're just kind of dragging them along. So don't be afraid to let good people go if they want to leave. What do you do when someone doesn't do their work? This is kind of getting to the crux of like dealing with groups of people. Any ideas? I don't know how much we care, but don't take it. What's the caption for that going to be? He appeals to a quiet audience. When someone doesn't do their work. So there's a whole canon of answers we could have here, but the most important thing is don't get mad. And this carries across everything. There is never a reason to get mad in any context with anyone for any reason. I'm not saying I haven't gotten mad, but I've never gotten mad for a good reason, because there is no good reason to get mad. We are working with, again, whether it's volunteering, startups. See, the thing with startups, I haven't mentioned them much tonight, but startups are essentially student groups that intend to make money in a lot of ways, right? Or they have like a business plan that has some kind of growth model or income model down the track. People are part of these things because they feel warm and welcome there. And if you start yelling at people, if you start getting mad at people, if you start degrading people, then it's not going to go very well. I always say that in my 2 years of running SunSwift, I only got mad at someone 3 times. I've been very mad at groups of people before, you know, like telling everyone to shut the hell up and stuff. But in terms of like looking someone dead in the eyes and like kind of trying to crush their spirits, I've done that 3 times. 2 times were kind of weirdly petty. I was just in a bad mood that day. There was a guy in the team who we were taking these big fancy photos that cost a lot of money to take, and he kept pulling faces in them. And I kept saying, do not pull any more faces in this photo. We'll take it a 3rd and final time. And then later that day I looked at the photo and he pulled another face, and I marched straight outside and just started yelling at him and telling him that he's like retarded and all these other awful things. And like it felt good because like you feel like you're trying to equalize some moral imbalance, right? And maybe you are, but the point is that approach never works. Because you're just going to alienate people, you're just going to bug people. The 3rd time I yelled at someone was someone that went on the race with us last time, and it turned into a big nightmare. Because that day I yelled at them, for the next 3 weeks, they just slowly started stewing and hating me and hating me and hating me and hating me until it started blowing up, and then you kind of can't bring that back in a high stress environment. So there's never a good excuse to get mad at people. There's always another way to do it. I don't know what it is, but trust me, if you ever find yourself getting mad at people or talking down to people, then you've messed up a little more than they have. And the last point here, what do you do when people are fighting? So you'll often have people under you fighting, people in people in disagreements, or maybe they don't want to work together. This is probably one of the most common things in student groups. I'll take you back to the communication diagram we saw before with context. They have different contexts. That's most likely what's happening. They're getting into arguments about what's important. They might think that it's important that we get this done quickly and brashly, and someone else might think we get it done slowly and properly. Okay, now there is a right answer. I really don't believe that these are just two people disagreeing and we'll just agree to disagree. They're both informing those opinions based on their understanding of priorities. So you can sit them down, let them talk about it, you talk about it, bring them together, and what you'll find is, again, once people understand what everyone sees and there's a common platform, then most people will just say, okay, I get it. I think we all agree now. So great leaders are almost always great simplifiers. So people who can sit people down, and that's what I mean, like bring these contexts together, simplify things out. Who can cut through argument, debate, and doubt to offer a solution everybody can understand. Okay, so that's really just echoing what I just said. I'm going to skip this video because it's late. But the sixth point then, this is a very mechanical part, how to be operationally effective. This just means how to be a good manager. So we talked earlier about how awful the word management is, but it is still relevant because managers do the right things, do things right. Leadership's about doing the right things. Okay. So there are a lot of very practical things we've got to talk about at the end here, and I won't take up much of your time. But firstly, in regards to team meetings, now I don't just mean meeting as a whole team, I mean meeting people. Anyone who's been part of a group is familiar with the perils of meetings. Sometimes you have no meetings and things go chaotic. Sometimes you decide we're going to meet every 3 days. I think stand-ups are one of the best examples of that, right? Like we're going to have daily stand-ups or something like this. This is what I call oversight valley. Basically, if you have no oversight or lots of oversight, you get a lot of overhead, right? If you have lots of oversight, the overhead makes a lot of sense. If you spend half of your time with groups of people meeting and just like discussing and planning, what happens is you get nothing done because you've got too much overhead and you suck all their time away. If you have no oversight, they have all the time to do their stuff, but they tend to kind of go in the wrong direction slowly, and then all of a sudden you have to bring them all back in, and that consolidation process takes a very long amount of time. So if you're ever working with groups of people, figure out exactly like what is a good balance between like meeting with people a lot, syncing up with them a lot, and not too much. In terms of keeping track of things, a lot of the cool stuff about management is you don't actually have specific answers, you just have principles. So like there are lots of tools out there to keep track of various things, and you can use whatever, and you'll probably use different ones every year because the industry updates so quickly. But what's important is if you're ever trying to accomplish something, you should have two things. One is a knowledge manager and one is a process manager. Okay? A knowledge manager is essentially something where you keep long-term content. It's where you keep it for knowledge management reasons, so people can look at it later, so you have concise summaries. Used a lot of Confluence in my life from Atlassian. Wikimedia software is the same. Anything like that, really. Something that's static, you know it's going to be there in 5 years if you need it. It has history tracking sometimes. And then the second part is process or task management. So this is like chatting, right? Informal chatting, things like Facebook, HipChat, Slack, emails, things that, and this is how I define them, process management essentially assumes that everything you're communicating through will disappear, right, at some point or another. If you are looking through emails to find information, then you haven't knowledge managed very well. Okay, so if you are ever trying to get groups of people together, then just ask yourself, like, how are we managing knowledge and how are we managing processes? Processes are essentially in team communication, and how do you keep track of tasks? This is just a screenshot of us using Confluence in the SolidCar team. In terms of recruiting, there are two really important pieces of advice I have. Try and give everyone in the team a role. I think one of the worst things you can do is have a team full of just like people. Like these are our 10 mechanical engineers. We have, oh yeah, I got a photo here. So this is the guy in our team. He's our battery box lead. He's in charge of making a box. It's a very heavy duty box, but that's his role. And he's a leader of the battery box. Like some people try and shy away from this because they think it's a little bit like elitist or everyone like a little bit overdone, like, you know, I am the battery box lead. But it is important because If they leave, you know exactly what hole they've left. You know who to chase up in terms of who's responsible for something. And it teaches them a little bit of leadership, because leadership is fueled by responsibility, and if you give them a responsibility, they're going to learn things as well. One of the best things we ever did in the Solar Car team was that about a year ago, we restructured the team that everyone was in charge of about 3 other people at least, nearly everyone on the team. And what was amazing was within 4 months, the number of grievances and issues people had went way down. Because what we found was that when we made everyone in the team a leader of something, they felt a lot more comfortable being led, right? Because they understood it. They understood that they had to tell people things that maybe they didn't like. So when we told them things they didn't like, they understood. You know, they were empathetic to that idea. And rule 2 is, as your team grows, build levels of abstraction. For small teams, maybe like 10 or under, you can kind of have these very flat teams where everyone communicates. But as your things get bigger, 15, 20, 25 and above, you need to make sure that you're not just kind of consolidating everything in one place. Because as your team grows, if everyone has to keep up with all of the information, it's not really going to be that relevant. So for instance, we don't need the people worrying about our business and marketing dealing with the email chains to do with how electrical engineers are deciding what to put in their circuits. Right? It's okay if you have 4 or 5 people, because everyone does care about each other very intimately. But once that grows, you need to put in these walls. I've always been a big fan of the idea that boundaries create freedom. It's a bit of an irony. I think one thing people try and do is they try and have these open teams where everyone can share and everyone can give their opinions. But what often happens is that, therefore, everyone feels entitled to opinion. Everyone wants to challenge each other, and no one feels like they can go away and do their work without being challenged. So, you know, the example before about our battery box lead, they know they're in charge of the battery box. And because we build these walls where we say, you don't need to worry about the battery box, you don't need to worry about the battery box, we've got someone and a couple of people who are worrying about it, they have control. And that's one of the funniest things I find, is that if you do create these strong boundaries and these strong barriers and these strong walls, people actually feel a lot more comfortable with autonomy, and they feel like they have more control over their space. So don't be afraid to put up barriers. And lastly, just on Gantt charts. I hate Gantt charts. It's like one of the first things you see someone do. I'm not saying there's no place for them, but it's one of the first things you see someone do. They're like, I am a project manager, I'm going to Gantt chart everything out. But the problem is we're working in student-related groups where the reason you don't get things done is not because people don't work hard, it's because you run out of money, it's because things go over time, it's because you don't have the expertise. The number of times we've had people do things in the timeline we set, but then it just breaks because they don't know what they're doing, right? And then, you know, it never goes to plan. I've seen people plan Gantt charts time and time and time again, and about 2 months in, you just throw them out because you realize they weren't really reflective of anything. It is still important to get a sense of the runway and where you're going. Like, always plan ahead. You know, like, always know in 3 months we want to be here, in 6 months we want to be here. But I am a big fan of only really working a few weeks at a time. Your priority should always be, how is everyone's attitude? Is everyone happy? Do they know what we're doing? Are they motivated to know what we're doing? Let's get our heads down, let's get some work done. Let's know where we want to be in 3 weeks. Because next week, where you're going to want to be in 3 weeks is very different. Okay, like a good example. Very recently, in RoboCup, we had a plan where we were like, okay, on Wednesday, the robots will be able to see the ball, right? And then we found out on the weekend that reality is that's going to be a few weeks away, probably, right? And I might even be being a bit liberal there. So if I just had this nice like Gantt chart where I was like, okay, we'll see the ball on Tuesday, and then we can play soccer on Friday. I spent hours and hours into this big dramatic plan, and then it all just goes to hell. Things go to hell all the time. So don't overplan things. Just keep the energy up. That's backwards. Cool. So quick recap again, just to finish off. We talked about what leadership is. Leadership is often different to some of the classical ideas of what you have of management and discipline and all these other really aggressive things. We talked about why it's important. We are mostly engineers in here, and the industry is demanding leaders. The industry wants leaders. They tend to move up quicker at companies. They tend to get employed a lot easier. It tends to offset any deficiencies they have academically. And how we do these things are we focus on relationships and communication. Human interaction is at the core of all of this, and understanding is at the core of all of this. We make sure that we're prioritizing our time, that we are putting the right things first, that we try and listen when we can and stand up for ourselves when we know we have listened. we know how to deal with these challenges, and we still know how to do the stock standard operational stuff, which is just Management 101. So, last quote for the night. The first responsibility of a leader is to define reality, the last is to say thank you, and in between, the leader is just a servant. At the end of the day, you are helping these people out that you want to achieve this goal that you have set. And you will be thankful at the end, and they'll be thankful for you. So, yeah, if you can keep these things in mind, that would be great. And thank you for your time. So.
Starting gun sends a kiss to the sun. I'm alive. Running on batteries under desert skies. A blanket of stars will be our bed tonight. This moment must be lived. This moment must be lived. Oh, embrace the sign, battle to exist. Indestructible. Lord, our rich song will be guiding us home. Light up our path, for the struggle is done. This moment must be lived. This moment must be lived. Oh, embrace the sign, battle to exist. Indestructible. Lord, our rich song will be guiding us home. Light up our path, for the struggle is done. This moment must be lived. This moment must be lived.